Compared to a photo provided by the government, which shows Wong prior to the self-immolation, we can see that the scalp line of the self-immolator is very neat all the way across the top of his forehead. We can't see his hairline. It even looks like he might be wearing a wig or a mask. It is common knowledge that human hair burns very easily and quickly. It was reported that Wang Jindong was seriously burned, yet we can see that his hair remains untouched and forms a clear-cut line above his forehead. Wouldn't his hair be one of the first things to burn? How can it be so neat after he was engulfed by flames? And oddly enough, he stays seated while on fire. Footage of burning victims shows that they experience intense pain, and they usually do not remain in one position. Could Wang Jindong be wearing fireproof clothing? He looks bundled up, as if he's wearing layers of extra clothes. Even the ears of Wang Jindong in the CCTV film don't match those of the man in the photograph. Look at the photo of Wang. The earlobe is close to the head, and the shape of the ear is long, whereas the self-immolator's ear is small and round. Was the man who set himself on fire the real Wang Jindong? Notice the plastic Sprite bottle between the man's legs. It looks brand new, as if the flames never touched it. Government officials claim that Wang Jindong drank gasoline from the Sprite bottle before he set himself on fire, and that he was very seriously burned. How is it possible that a plastic bottle filled with gasoline, encompassed by a burning man's legs, remains in perfect condition? There are more discrepancies in the stories reported by the Xinhua news agency. One involves Liu Chunling, who was a self-immolator apparently knocked down by a stick-like object thrown at her. Miss Liu is the mother of the 12-year-old who also set herself on fire. According to a detailed government report dated January 30th, entitled Documentary of Self-Immolation, Miss Liu started practicing Falun Gong before March 1999, before the Chinese government launched the persecution of Falun Gong. However, a story published by the Washington Post reveals a different fact. Philip Pan, the Washington Post reporter who wrote the story, went to Miss Liu's hometown in Kaifeng City, Henan Province, to find out more about Miss Liu. Miss Liu's neighbors told him that they had never seen Miss Liu practice Falun Gong. The article published by the Washington Post attracted a lot of attention. To cover up the discrepancies, Xinhua news agency reporters quickly changed their story. In a February 8th news program, Xinhua reporters stated that Miss Liu started to practice only after the crackdown of Falun Gong began in July 1999. They said she practiced at home and didn't let others see her because she was afraid that her neighbors would find out she was a Falun Gong practitioner. This report also claimed that Miss Liu frequently beat her mother and daughter, behavior that is in direct conflict with the teaching of Falun Gong, which promote compassion and tolerance. It is hard to believe that this woman was a Falun Gong practitioner. Xinhua's embellishments to the story continued. Another alleged self-immolator, Liu Bairong, was never mentioned in the news agency's first report, and there is no footage to show she was in Tiananmen Square. However, a week after the incident, she appeared on a Chinese Central TV program to speak against Falun Gong. She claimed she was prepared to self-immolate, but changed her mind at the last minute when she saw the others burning. She said she drank half a bottle of gasoline on that day to prepare.
I drank about a half bottle, and I wanted to pour the rest on my body.
Drinking 1/10 of an ounce of gasoline per pound of body weight will cause death. For her weight, half a bottle of gasoline would be enough to kill her. Even if she could be saved in time, she would suffer severe symptoms from having been poisoned. But if you watch her on TV, you can't see any evidence that she drank that much gasoline.
They all had serious inhalation wounds to the trachea. They were in danger of choking at any time. So at the same time we operated on their surface burns, we also immediately performed the tracheotomy.
In a tracheotomy, a tube is placed in the throat below the vocal cords so the patient can breathe. The patient cannot use his mouth to breathe, and air cannot get to the vocal cords and larynx, so the patient cannot speak. It takes many days for an adult to adjust to this condition, and much longer for a child. If a patient really wants to speak, he has to cover the tube opening, but the voice will be intermittent and unclear. Yet the reports from an interview of the 12-year-old victim by the Xinhua news agency present a different picture.
阿姨，我是这样想的。
The little girl was in such serious condition, her trachea was cut open, yet she could talk with the interviewers so loudly and clearly after only 4 days. Furthermore, standard medical procedure dictates that patients with large areas of burned skin be placed in an isolated, sterile room, because the burned area needs to be exposed to the air. This prevents infection and makes it easier for the nurse to apply medication and clean the wounds. Doctors and nurses treating these patients are required to wear masks and sterile clothing when entering the room. Yet, when we look at the CCTV footage, we see that the patient is in an open room. We also see that the patient is wrapped in thick layers of gauze bandages and that the nurse is not wearing a mask. Neither is the reporter wearing a mask, gloves, or any sterile clothing. Why would a patient in such critical condition with such serious burns be treated so casually? Authorities did not allow any reporters other than those from the Xinhua news agency to interview 12-year-old Xu Ying, nor did they allow any of her family members to visit. The authorities even threatened her grandmother to such an extent that the elderly woman was terrified to be interviewed by any reporters. 2 months after the incident in Tiananmen Square, the hospital announced the sudden death of Xu Ying. Did this 12-year-old, who was able to sing just a few days after her tracheotomy and major burn surgery, really die? How did this happen when she was in such remarkable condition after the event? And why was she under such tight security that even her family was not allowed to visit? Since its introduction to the public in 1992, Falun Gong has been spread in over 50 countries. In the 7 years prior to the onset of the persecution, there had never been a single case of self-immolation among Falun Gong practitioners in China, nor has it ever been known to happen to any practitioners outside China. Since July of 1999, Falun Gong practitioners have endured the vicious persecution waged by the Jiang Zemin regime. Practitioners have been fined exorbitant amounts, fired from jobs, expelled from school, beaten and gang-raped by police, held captive and drugged in mental hospitals, and even tortured to death. The state-controlled media has launched a massive slander campaign that includes trying to link Falun Gong with cults that believe in suicide and killing. This is despite the fact that the teachings of Falun Gong prohibit violence, suicide, and killing of any kind. Because of their deep convictions, Falun Gong practitioners have always appealed in a totally rational, peaceful, and nonviolent way. The purpose of this apparent staging of multiple self-immolations is clearly to incite hatred among the Chinese people toward Falun Gong practitioners and to discredit Falun Gong in the eyes of the world. However, all information about the self-immolations that occurred in Tiananmen Square was blocked. Access to the victims and the scene after the incident was restricted. Only Chinese government officials were allowed to conduct any investigation. The interviews of the victims, conducted by the state-run Xinhua news agency, resulted only in more questions about the authenticity of the self-immolations and further speculation about the role that Jiang's regime had in orchestrating it. No third-party investigation has ever been allowed to uncover the true facts. The horror of this self-immolation incident truly reveals the lengths that the Jiang Zemin regime will go to in its attempts to wipe out the practice of Falun Gong.